All right, so this video will be covering converting fractions to decimals. The first step, once again, is to always look at when is the question extremely easy to answer and can we get back to that original state. So as we've already talked about, fractions work on the same base 10 system as integers and decimals. So if we get something such as 7/10, we start by writing out our place values. So you get our ones, decimal, our tenths. Well, we've got 7/10, and then everything else would get a 0. So similarly, if we get 39 hundredths, we would end up starting with our ones, decimal, tenths, hundredths, and work our way back up. And I have 39 and 0. Once again, let's give two more examples. If I end up having 7 hundredths, I end up starting with ones. There's my decimal, tenths, hundredths. Well, I've got 7 hundredths. I start there and fill in the rest with zeros. And our last example would be if I had, let's go 150 hundredths again, which we would be able to simplify to 15/10 if we saw that. If not, we'd start with ones, tenths, hundredths. Well, I've got 150 of them, and I work my way up. So that is the same as 1 and 5/10. All right, it gets a little trickier once again if we change our denominators up. So if we get something such as 1/5. So these are one of our benchmark fractions that we should have memorized, but I'm using it as a simple example. So once again, we look back, okay, when is converting fractions to decimals easy? Well, it's easy if we have a denominator of 10 or 100 or 1000, because that fits our base 10 system. But here I've got a denominator of 5. So what can I do? Well, I can change my denominator. I'd like to change it into a 10. Well, how am I going to do that? I'm going to multiply my fraction by 2/2 to get the equivalent fraction. 1 times 2 gives me 2, and I get 2/10, which is, once again, there's my ones and my tenths, and I've got 2/10, and I've converted. So same thing, if we get something like 11/20, well, I want to look if I can convert it into a 10 or a 100. Well, in this case, the 20, I could change into a 10, but dividing by 11 by 2 would leave me with a decimal in the numerator, which we don't want. So I'm going to change it into 100. And we know that 20 times 5 gives us 100. So we end up with 11 times 5 is 55 hundredths, which would give me, there's our ones, tenths, hundredths. Once again, until you are very certain with your place values, drawing these lines out with your place values will just mean that you make a lot less simple mistakes and that you always ensure you're putting your numbers in the correct spot. So I'll give two more examples. Try and find a denominator that's a base 10 or a power of 10 and multiply them out. So if I give you 21/25, what would I multiply that by? And if I gave you 3/50, what would I multiply that by? So I'll give you a second to solve those. All right, if you haven't got the answer yet, pause and resume the video once you have solved these. First one, I can turn a 25 into 100, and I get that. Well, 25 times 4 gives me 100, so I'm going to multiply the top by 4. So 20 times 4 gives me 80. 4 times 1 is 4, so I end up with 84 hundredths, which would be, here's my ones, my tenths, my hundredths. 84 hundredths. And I've got 3/50ths, and so I need to turn that into 100 as well. And so 50 times 2 gives me 100, and I end up with 6/100ths, which I start, there's my ones, tenths, hundredths. I've got 6 and 0, so I've got 6/100ths. All right, now, so those are the easy methods that we've seen before. However, we are going to get certain numbers that do not multiply nicely into a denominator of 10, 100, or 1,000, such as 1/3. Now, in this case, what you're going to end up doing is remembering that this line here means divide, and so this is 1 divided by 3. So we're going to go back to using long division. For my class, once again, we only ever go to 3 decimal places, because after that, we mostly use this for comparing, and we wouldn't need to go further than that. If we were, you would have a calculator. So we're going to start, add our decimal in, decimal comes straight up. Remember to keep your numbers all lined up, otherwise, once again, you'll make simple mistakes. So 3 goes into 1, 0 times. 3 times 0 is 0. I'm going to subtract. 1 minus 0 gives me 1. Bring my 0 over and my 1 up. So I've got 3 into 10. Well, 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 gives me 9. And 10 minus 9 is 1. Add another 0, bring my 1 up. 3 goes into 10 3 times. And 3 times 3 gives me 9, the remainder of 1. Now I can stop at this point because I've got 2 of my numbers on the top are the same, and I've had the same remainder multiple times in a row, meaning this will be a repeating fraction. So this repeating fraction is 0.33 repeated. Now if I was going to do another question, one that's not repeating, so let's use eighths. So if I go 3/8, so once again, same thing. I could, if I remembered, turn 8 into 1,000 multiplied by 125, but if we don't see that, start with your division, denominator on the outside, add your decimal, move it up. 8 goes into 3, 0 times. 8 times 0 is 0. 3. Add a 0 and bring my 3 up. 8 goes into 3. Well, 8 times 3 gives me 24. I subtract. 30 minus 24 is 6. Bring my 6 up. And 8 goes into 60 7 times, and 8 times 7 gives me 56. 60 minus 56 is 4. Add a 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times, which is 40, and I'm left with 0. So my final answer is 375 thousandths. All right, so on the next page, I am going to give you a couple more examples. Pause the video once you've written them down, solve, and resume the video once you have completed them. All right, so here are 2 questions, 5/8 and 7/6. Using long division, convert these into decimals. Pause the video once again once you've written them down, resume once you have completed the 2. All right, so we're going to look at 5/8 first. So we're going to have 8 into 5. I'm going to add my decimal right away. Well, 8 goes into 5 0 times. 8 times 0 is 0. Subtract, and I end up with 5. Add my 0 in and bring my 5 up. 8 times 6 is 48. 50 minus 48 gives me 2. Add a 0 and bring my 2 up. Remember to keep your numbers nice and spaced out and keep your numbers lined up. Once it starts getting crammed, we just end up making little mistakes. 8 goes into 20 twice. Excuse me, 16. 20 minus 16 gives me 4. 0. And bring my 4 up. 8 goes into 40 5 times. The remainder is 0. So my answer is 625 thousandths. With 7/6, once again, set it up. Add my decimals. 6 goes into 7 one time. 6 times 1 is 6. Subtract. 7 minus 6 is 1. Add my 0 and bring my 1 up. 6 goes into 10 once. 6 times 1 is 6. I end up getting 4. So just remember, getting 2 ones in a row does not mean that it is a repeating decimal. We need to get the same remainders on the bottom multiple times in a row as well. So I get 4. I'm going to bring my 4 up. 6 goes into 40 6 times, which ends up with 36. Which gives me 4, which was the same remainder I had before. Bring a 0. 6 goes into 40 6 times, 36. Remainder of 4. So once again, remainder of 4 multiple times in a row, 6 multiple times. We end up with an answer of 1. So 1, 6, 6 repeated. So there are 3 steps. The main thing to remember is, can I convert the fraction in, or the denominator into a 10, 100, or 1,000? The answer is yes. Use multiplication to find an equivalent fraction. If the answer is no, I cannot turn it into a 10, 100, or 1,000, use division